I think I've done it, guys. I found a way to color my drawings while skipping the step that takes the longest, by far, the shading. This might be a pretty big W. So in this week's class, I'll show you all the steps to go from a black and white drawing to a colored illustration, like this. And this might be the method that requires the least amount of actual painting that I've ever come up with. This might look like a shaded drawing to you, but I didn't actually paint any of it. And it'll all make sense in a couple of minutes. So let's get started.
Okay!
All right, so here's what we have on the menu. Flat colors, automatic shading, what? And light 1, light number 2, materials, and line tint. So I'll go over all of those steps in details, starting from the first step, the flat colors. So to begin, we're not going to bother with the color choices, just fill in each of the different materials of your design with its own distinct color, like this. All of it on the same layer. And there's one very important step that you need to follow though. When filling in your color regions, make sure you use the pencil tool, not the brush tool. And here's why. Because next we'll be using the paint bucket tool to replace those temporary colors with the real ones, but if you're using the regular brush tool, look at what happens when you paint bucket in a new color over and over. See how the transition moves there? Well, after a couple of paint buckets, your regions will start to bleed into the next and it becomes this huge headache. So now instead check the version with the pen tool as comparison and then see how clear that remains. It doesn't move at all when you paint bucket. And this is just a trick that I picked up in my first ever job as an artist when I was coloring comic books. Now that all our regions are colored, obviously we need a proper color palette because this looks terrible. So for that, you just gotta Google like color.adobe and it'll give you this website here. From there, we just go and select a split complementary color harmony. This is just one of my favorites, but feel free to choose whatever you want. And here we have a little slider so we can just pick the colors that you like, and anything you select basically should create this harmonious color palette. At least that's the idea. So I'll go with something like this. Now I can just take a screenshot of that and paste it in here to use as a reference. And now I got kind of a better direction to start replacing those original colors. Now obviously you don't have to stick to this exactly. You can always brighten or darken the colors and it'll still maintain a good harmony. Also, if you find that it's like too busy or too colorful, you can always tone down the busyness by introducing just black and white as sort of buffer areas between the colors. Like, I really like to use this stuff. It kind of tends to create a rest area for the eye. So that's why I opted to go with white for the pants. So yeah, this is what I'm gonna go with. Next up is the shading. Now, I did say I wouldn't actually be shading this manually, so here's what I'll do. And to better demonstrate it, I'll just show you with this circle first. So basically, what I'm trying to do here is use the line art that I already have to generate my shading. Now, I've found that you can get something pretty decent by using like 3 to 4 levels of blurriness. So first, I'll duplicate my line art and blur the crap out of it. So you might need to duplicate the layer a couple of times, if it's blurred that much. Otherwise, you might not be able to see anything. And then you can just kind of merge all of those down. And then I'll do it again, but with a slightly reduced blurriness level. And then again a third time with less blur, and finally once more with just a little bit of blur. You get the idea, right? Obviously, this doesn't look quite right, but if we clip these shading layers to the flat color layer by pressing Alt and clicking the layer like directly underneath, well, we get some really nice shading really quickly. It's not perfect, right? But it's pretty good. And in Clip Studio Paint, the button to create a clipping mask is right here, and you'll know that it's a clipping mask when that turns red. Now what I like to do next is lock the layers and paint over the black shading with a color, to make this less muddy. You don't really want to use black as is for shading because it tends to, it makes all the colors look kind of crappy. Now, of course, I can merge all of these different shading layers together or not, it's really up to you. But this is what I meant, when I said that you don't need to actually paint anything. It's like black magic. Now, let's actually do this with my entire drawing to see what that looks like. The first step is super diffuse, then less and less as we go. And now that I have my 4 levels of blurriness, obviously this still needs a little bit of work. So I'll get the original lines back on top of the layers where they belong, right? And then clip these layers to my flat colors to clean this up a little bit. But things will always look a bit ugly in regions where there's a lot of lines. But it's not the time to panic. I can just erase those a little bit to improve the results. So I find it helps when you hide the rest that you're not working on, and just layer by layer, I'll go get rid of those darker areas that really don't look good, right? Using a soft brush. Sometimes you won't need much more, but of course we can also go in and add a little bit more shadow in areas that need it. To do this, like I like to just collapse everything into a single layer, and basically that's gonna become my new shading layer. And by the way, having those color regions is also super helpful here because I can just go back to that initial, flat layer, then magic wand the color region that I want, and with my selection, I can go back to the shading layer to shade that particular area without, worrying about painting over the rest. It's pretty useful. And now I can wrap this up by moving on to the lighting step. But first, I'll just quickly lock my layer and paint over my shading with a slightly lighter and more saturated color to make sure that things don't look too muddy. Something like this, maybe. And now, next, it's time to work on our 2-light setup. But first, none of this would be possible without the sponsor of this video, Art School for Digital Artists, my full university equivalent art program. Everything I show in these YouTube videos, it's all derived from the fundamentals that I cover in the full program. We have classes on things like perspective, colors, composition, design, anatomy, storytelling, 30 in-depth classes in total, along with a week-by-week study guide so that you're never lost wondering what you should be working on next. Students also get lifetime access to the program. You just pay once and you're done. And you get also exclusive access to our school's private Discord server. And it's perfect for complete beginners or anyone more advanced looking to take their art to the next level. I have ex-students working in nearly every major game studio, so check it out with the link down in the video description if you've been struggling, kind of learning on your own. And by the way, the summer sale will be live for a little bit longer, so you'll be able to grab the program at a massive discount until the end of the month only. Don't want you to miss out on this. And of course, if you're already a student, thank you. Now, let's go back to the video. All right, now this is where the magic will happen. Unlike the shading step, I'll actually be painting this time, but you'll see painting the light is still relatively quick. It would be hard to see the light over these bright colors though, so we're going to need to darken all of these colors first. Now the easiest way to do that will be to create a new clipping mask over our flats layer and then paint bucket in a mid-blue-ish color. And then we'll want to set that layer to multiply mode so that it darkens everything that's underneath it. And the only reason really I chose blue is to mimic kind of the blue of the sky, but you could technically use any color you want. Next, I'll create a new layer on top of that, and this time we'll actually be painting the light. So that layer I'll set to overlay mode and try to imagine where the light might hit if it were coming from above for a more dramatic look. I'm just thinking of the sunlight, for example. You don't have to guess though, I've been doing this for decades, so it comes a little bit easier now, but don't hesitate to use a tool like Magic Poser Web that I seem to be plugging all the time, and use that as reference. You can just pose your character, move the light around, and just, that's a perfect reference right there. Now back to my drawing here. This doesn't really seem bright enough, and that's pretty normal when using overlay mode, so I'll just duplicate the layer to make it brighter. And then it's easy to adjust the layer's opacity if I think that it's a little too bright. And one thing I always do to my lights is to add a bit of a more saturated terminator. Basically, that's the short transition area between the highlights and the shadows that you'll see here. In Photoshop, I have a nice little shortcut for this. I can just use the inner glow layer style to get that effect basically for free. So you see how much better that looks, with, without. Or of course though, you can just paint it manually with a more orange-ish soft brush. It really isn't a big job, so it's not like I'm saving a ton of time with using Photoshop. But all of this was just light 1 of 2. So I'll do the same thing again, but this time I'll just have my secondary light source coming from a different direction, maybe from behind the character. And here again, feel free to pick any color that you want. It's all the same, except the direction is different, obviously, and the opacity as well. So for this one, maybe I just won't duplicate the light layer. I'll just keep a single one so that it's not as as bright as the main light source. So what do we have so far? Flat colors, shading, light 1 and light 2. And having all of these on their own layers, we can just adjust the opacity to fine-tune the result, exactly how we want it. So that's the reason why I split everything up like this. Now next we'll work on the materials, because everything kind of looks like it's made out of the same material right now. This featureless material where there's no highlights anywhere, there's no reflections, nothing. It's just, it kind of looks boring. We can't have that. Illustrations look much better when there's different types of contrasts, like contrasts in the color, in the lights, and also in the materials. Basically, what I'm doing here is I'm going over everything and adding highlights and reflections depending on what material that I'm painting. Skin, for example, should have a little bit of gloss, but not too much. Metals should be very reflective, etc, etc. You get the idea. So this layer I've set to hard light blend mode, and I'll use it for stuff like a little blush on the cheeks also, like the red of the lips, the highlights on the eyeballs, and maybe some textures also to make her outfit feel a little bit weathered. And this is a relatively quick step, so we can see here the before and after result, and I think that looks much better. And if you're curious, this is what the layer looks like by itself, kind of looks like nothing, but it makes a big difference. Now, for the final step, we'll be coloring the line art, because those black outlines look a little bit too intense in certain parts here, especially around the areas where we painted a light. So what I'll do is create a new layer on top of my lines and clip it to it. So with this, I'll just paint over the areas of my line art where the contrast feels a little too high for my taste, like lighter blue around the hair, like dark red for the skin outlines, that kind of stuff, So this is what it looked like before, and after this quick step, this is what we get. Much better. Now, of course, feel free to add anything else to this method to make it your own, but those are basically the basic steps, right? So starting from the line art to the flat colors, the fake shading, the first light, second light, the materials, and finally, the line colors. Now, this is probably the fastest coloring method that I've ever come up with. All of these steps took me less than 1 hour to make, so not bad, I'd say. And also check this out, because of how we set all of this up, if I wanted, I could go back and change the base colors however I want to try different color palettes maybe. I can even change the color of the lights if I want to. So technically I'm done, but it's so modular of a method that I can always go back and tweak things to get a bunch of different variants. Big brain stuff. Oops. So there you go. I hope you like the results, and I hope you give it a try. So this won't work for every situation, like most coloring methods won't, but for standalone characters like I have here, it works pretty awesome. So let me know what you think in the comments. And while you wait for next week's class, for a much different kind of drawing process video, I would highly recommend that you check my cell shading video. That should be up on screen here in just a second. I'll see you there. So click the link. Do it now.